"Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. This cabin is reserved for premium guests." The words rang out sharper than the intercom chime, slicing through the first-class air like a knife. A few heads turned. A woman in 2D peeked over her magazine. A man across the aisle raised a curious eyebrow. Even the teenage boy near the bulkhead subtly tilted his phone camera up from his tray table, already recording. The target of the outburst? An elderly man, tall, thin, with a gentle slouch. He wore a soft gray cardigan, well-worn loafers, and carried a leather folio under his arm that looked older than some of the passengers. His white hair was combed back neatly. No designer luggage, no flashy watch, no entourage. He looked harmless. And that, apparently, was the problem. "I have seat 1A, the man said, voice quiet but steady. The flight attendant blocking his path, Kelsey Moran, 39, lead attendant for Global Air Flight GA264, didn't move. She folded her arms and gave a small, disbelieving chuckle. "Sir, 1A is reserved for Global Plus Executive Tier members. Do you have documentation?" The old man calmly reached into his coat pocket and handed over a paper boarding pass. Paper, not digital, not on an app. Kelsey already disliked it. She scanned the stub. Franklin G. Linwood, seat 1A, first class. It checked out, but that only annoyed her more. She didn't like being wrong, and she especially didn't like anyone who made her job feel uncertain. "Is there a problem?" a voice asked from behind. It was Emily, her younger colleague, pushing the drinks cart. Kelsey didn't answer her. She kept her eyes on the man. "You can proceed, sir," she finally said, tone clipped. "Thank you," the man replied, nodding politely. He walked past her slowly, with the same quiet dignity he had maintained since the moment he stepped onto the plane. And yet, Kelsey still felt something was off. As the man settled into 1A, stowing his folio under the seat, a soft murmur rippled through the cabin. Some passengers tried not to stare, others didn't bother. "Did you see that?" whispered the woman in 1C. "That seat costs like $3,000, someone muttered. "He looks like he wandered out of a public library." The teen in 2B was still recording. "Guys," he whispered into his phone mic, "something weird is happening in first class right now." Kelsey moved to the galley and whispered sharply to Emily. "Who checked him in?" Emily blinked. "Ground crew. Everything scanned properly." "He doesn't belong here," Kelsey snapped. "Look at him." Emily hesitated. "He's polite, quiet. Kind of reminds me of my grandpa." Kelsey rolled her eyes. "Your grandpa doesn't fly Global Plus first." She stepped out of the galley again, just in time to see the old man take out a fountain pen and begin writing in his notebook. Not a phone, not a tablet, a notebook. What century was this man from? He didn't ask for champagne, didn't request a blanket, didn't even put on headphones. He just sat. Kelsey moved toward him again, this time under the pretense of checking pre-departure drink preferences. "Would you like something to drink, sir?" "Just water, no ice," he replied with a soft smile. "Still water." "Got it," she said, and turned on her heel before he could thank her. Back in the galley, she huffed. "He's too calm, like he's hiding something." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Or he's just chill?" But Kelsey's mind was spinning. She had a standard, a vibe, a look. And this man didn't check any of the boxes. He was disrupting the harmony of her cabin. Then the murmur started again. A younger man in 2A leaned toward his companion. "Is that Linwood?" "Franklin Linwood." His companion blinked. "You mean the guy from the Linwood Fund?" "I don't know. I saw a photo of him once, but I thought he was dead." Kelsey heard it. She froze. Linwood? The name sounded vaguely familiar. Finance? Some Wall Street firm? She pulled out her work tablet and tapped into the passenger manifest again. Franklin G. Linwood. She searched the name in the crew database. Nothing came up. She tried to act casual, but she was sweating slightly under her perfectly pressed uniform. From his seat, The old man slowly looked up, and for just a split second, just long enough to unsettle her, he looked directly at her, calm and still, like he already knew she was unraveling. That smile again, polite, controlled, and very, very dangerous. Frank Linwood adjusted the cuff of his shirt with a kind of care that came from decades of habit, not vanity. Everything he wore had a quiet history. His cardigan had been a gift from his late wife 21 years ago. The shoes had carried him through more boardrooms than any leather-soled Gucci pair ever would. His folio, that had held the same pen, same yellow-lined paper since 1987. He didn't care to impress people. That used to be a strength. But lately, it felt like a liability, especially in first class. As the plane cruised toward altitude, Frank kept his eyes on the window, watching the blue of Puget Sound disappear beneath a veil of clouds. But his ears stayed alert. He could still hear murmurs from the passengers 2 rows back. Snippets of conversation floated toward him. Could be a retired teacher or something. How'd he even get the seat? Weird old guy, right? No phone, no laptop. He had heard it all before, on trains, in restaurants, in elevators. Whispered dismissals that came not from malice, but from habitual underestimation. People looked at his age, his clothes, his silence, and made assumptions. Always had. But it still stung. Even now, he didn't need validation. At 78, you stop chasing that kind of thing. But being misjudged, especially in such a condescending, public way, never truly stops cutting, especially not after what happened at the gate. The moment the flight attendant had blocked his path like he was trying to sneak into a private club. It hadn't shocked him, but it had reminded him of how people like Kelsey looked at people like him, and how quickly they believed you didn't belong. Frank turned his attention back to his notebook. The ink flowed smoothly under his fountain pen as he reviewed notes for the conference he was headed to in Toronto, where, in 2 days, he was slated to speak on post-crisis asset realignment in aviation finance. Not that anyone here knew that. And that was the point. He didn't broadcast who he was anymore. Those who needed to know already did. 10 years ago, he'd quietly stepped back from public-facing leadership. No more magazine interviews, no flashy bios on LinkedIn, just board seats, silent partnerships, and voting control behind the scenes, especially in the airline sector. After the 2010 recession, Frank had seen an opportunity no one else dared touch. Aviation debt. The kind no one wanted. The kind that buried CEOs and made CFOs sweat through their suits. Frank had bought it up quietly, piece by piece, through holding companies and limited partnerships. Within 6 years, he had controlling interest, or veto power, on credit lines for 4 of the 6 largest North American carriers. And one of them? Global Air. The very airline whose flight he was now sitting on. He didn't own the brand. He didn't sit in the CEO's chair. But his signature was buried in the covenants of their revolving credit facility. And under certain conditions that had just been met, he could pull the plug. Frank let out a long, slow breath. He didn't want to pull anything. He wasn't vindictive, but today was different. Across the aisle, Emily peeked at him from behind the drink cart. She looked confused, maybe even a little guilty. She had watched the interaction earlier, the way Kelsey had cornered the old man at the cabin curtain. How she raised her voice just loud enough for everyone to hear. But the man hadn't protested, not once. That stuck with her. He hadn't fought to prove himself. He hadn't tried to assert dominance. He had let the world misjudge him and kept moving. That unsettled her far more than if he had yelled. Kelsey, meanwhile, was pretending not to care, but she kept stealing glances too. From her perch at the galley door, she could still see 1A in her peripheral vision. Still see him calmly writing in that damn notebook. No phone, no calls, no emails. Who even flies without a laptop these days? Her chest tightened with something she refused to name. Doubt? Unease? No. Just irritation, she told herself. She scrolled through her flight tablet again, clicking his name. Franklin G. Linwood. Still nothing familiar. But then, behind her, a voice. "Hey, sorry to interrupt." It was a man from 2A, late 30s, business casual, sharp watch. Kelsey recognized him vaguely. Someone in finance. He nodded toward 1A. "I think that's Franklin Linwood." The Franklin Linwood. Kelsey's face froze. "I'm sorry?" The man leaned in, lowering his voice. "I used to intern for a fund that bought distressed airline debt in the 2010s. His name was on everything. He basically owns the paper that keeps half this industry afloat." Kelsey's stomach turned. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Unless there's another Linwood who flies first class with a notebook from the Cold War, yeah, I'm sure." Kelsey felt her pulse rise. She glanced back at 1A again. Still calm, still writing, still not saying a word. Frank felt the shift in the cabin before he saw it. He was used to that. People's energy changed when they learned who he was. Their tone softened. Their spines straightened. They stopped making jokes and started making space. But what always fascinated him was this. No one ever apologized for their assumptions. They just pivoted. Quietly. Cowardly. He took another sip of his water and returned to his notes. The speech he'd given Toronto would be simple. No slides, no jargon. Just this message. The health of an airline should not be judged by its branding, but by how it treats the people who make its business possible. He would say that. But today, he would live it. One seat, one flight, one very arrogant flight attendant. There was something about silence that unnerved people like Kelsey. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't submission. It was worse. It was the absence of reaction. And Frank Linwood, the old man in 1A, had mastered that art. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't pushed back, hadn't asked for anything, not even a glass of wine. He'd simply nodded, complied, and then sat with that leather folio like he was waiting for something far bigger than the meal service. And that made Kelsey itch. She hated not having the last word, hated not knowing where she stood in a situation. In her mind, power was something you projected, through posture, tone, confidence, image. That's what she had spent 15 years perfecting in first class, the illusion of control. But now, control was slipping. And she wasn't about to lose face in her own cabin. Emily returned from the mid-cabin galley with the drink cart. "He asked for just water again," she whispered, nodding toward 1A. "Still polite." Kelsey forced a laugh. "Of course he did. I'm starting to think he's trying to act humble on purpose." Emily frowned. Why would someone pretend to be humble? Kelsey shot her a sideways look. "Oh, please, it's a power play. People like that love to test the system. They show up looking like they don't belong, just to catch you judging them." "You mean people like old people?" "No," Kelsey said sharply. "I mean people who want attention without earning it. Look around. This is first class, not a soup kitchen." Emily said nothing, but the words hung in the air like spilled coffee. Across the aisle, a middle-aged man in a navy blazer subtly raised his brow. He'd heard that. And so had the teenage boy, still pretending to scroll on his phone, but clearly filming. Again. Kelsey moved to 1A with a folded menu in hand. "Mr. Linwood," she said, her voice now 2 octaves higher than sincere. "Have you had a chance to look at our entree options?" He looked up slowly, eyes warm but unreadable. "I haven't yet, but thank you." "Well, we've got filet mignon, herb-seared salmon, and a vegan option. But since we prepare in limited quantities, it's best to decide now." Frank offered a nod. "The salmon sounds fine." "Very well," Kelsey replied. She lingered, smiling just long enough to seem polite but sharp enough to show dominance. Then she added, "You might want to freshen up before meal service. First class can be a bit formal." Frank blinked once. "I'll keep that in mind." Kelsey walked away with a satisfied smirk. Back in the galley, Emily shook her head. You're really going after him, huh? Kelsey rolled her eyes. It's called protecting the brand, Emily. People pay 5 figures for these seats. Presentation matters. Emily looked down at the cart. So does dignity. Kelsey stiffened. Are you saying I'm being unprofessional? I'm saying he's done nothing wrong, and yet you're acting like he owes you an explanation just for sitting there. Kelsey scoffed. You're new. One day you'll understand what it means to keep first class running the way it should. Emily didn't respond, but she didn't help with the next round of drinks either. 30 minutes later, the meal service began. Frank received his salmon, plated neatly, alongside warm bread and butter. He thanked Emily quietly, but didn't touch the food right away. He was still writing, slow, precise, deliberate. Kelsey passed by again and stopped. Is the meal not to your liking, Mr. Linwood? He looked up. I'm simply not hungry yet, but thank you. She smiled sweetly. We just want to be sure everything's up to standard for you. Frank returned the smile, but this time there was something behind it. A flicker, a mirror, something that made her uncomfortable. I'm sure you do, he said softly. Across the aisle, the conversation had changed. Whispers floated. That's him, I'm telling you, Linwood Capital. Isn't he the guy who bailed out NovaJet in 16? No, he didn't just bail them out. He owns half their board now. Even the pilot had received a quiet message from flight control. Confirmed presence of Franklin G. Linwood on board GA-264. Affirmed. Maintain professionalism. Do not engage. But Kelsey didn't know that yet. She had just poured herself a sparkling water when a man from 3A approached her quietly. Excuse me, ma'am, he said, nodding politely toward the galley. Just a quick question about your service approach. She blinked. I'm sorry? Are you aware of who Mr. Linwood is? Her stomach clenched. I'm sorry, but I don't discuss other passengers, she said quickly. Maybe you should, he replied, walking away. Back at 1A, Frank finally closed his notebook. He looked around the cabin. He had seen every glance, felt every whisper. He had noted each one with the same mental pen he used in billion-dollar boardrooms. But he wasn't angry. No, anger was too small for this. What he felt was clarity. Clarity about how little had changed in the world, even in a suit-and-tie cabin, and clarity about what needed to happen next. Kelsey returned one more time, this time under the guise of checking seatbelt compliance. But what she really wanted was one last jab. Still comfortable, sir? Frank looked at her, expression serene. Very much so. Thank you for your consistent attention. She hesitated. That tone, was he mocking her? But then he turned back to his notebook, and she was left standing in the aisle, exposed, her armor of smug professionalism cracking at the edges. That's when the notification hit her watch. Urgent. Internal Ops notification. Subject, Franklin Linwood. Her heart skipped. She tapped the screen quickly and scrolled. Franklin Linwood currently holds financial leverage across 4 major airline credit networks. This is a high-profile individual. Treat with highest courtesy. Kelsey swallowed hard. Too late. The turbulence wasn't in the air. It was in the cabin. Frank Linwood could feel it, like a change in barometric pressure. Subtle, but unmistakable. Whispers now lasted longer. Eyes lingered. The room wasn't just watching him anymore. They were watching her. Kelsey Moran, in her signature updo and scarlet-lipped composure, was unraveling one passive-aggressive step at a time. And the cabin could feel it. 35 minutes after meal service, Kelsey made her move again. She came to his seat, hands behind her back, posture rigid like she was a military officer confronting a low-ranking soldier. Mr. Linwood, she said, voice overly bright. I noticed your meal was only half eaten. Would you like something else instead? Frank looked up, tone as smooth as the polished table tray. No, thank you. It was quite fine. Because here at Global Air, she continued, louder now, just enough for the first 3 rows to hear, we pride ourselves on meeting the standards of our premium guests. Sometimes that includes offering different options when expectations aren't met. Her smile was barbed wire wrapped in silk. Frank blinked slowly, then folded his napkin and placed it neatly on the tray. "I have no complaints," he said, calm as ever. But across the aisle, someone did. "Excuse me," the man in 2B called out, lowering his headphones. "Didn't he already say he's fine?" Kelsey turned, caught off guard. "I'm sorry?" The man leaned back, arms crossed. "You've been hovering around him the entire flight. What exactly do you think he's doing wrong?" Kelsey flushed slightly. "Sir, I'm simply ensuring all our first-class passengers receive top-tier service." "Sure doesn't look that way," someone muttered behind her. The comment hit like a spark to dry leaves. Kelsey pulled in a breath, smoothed her blouse, and gave the most practiced smile in her repertoire. "My apologies if it seemed excessive," she said tightly. "It's my job to observe when something feels inconsistent." Frank looked up from his folded napkin. "Inconsistent," he repeated, as if tasting the word. Kelsey gave a stiff nod. "Yes, standards, presentation, consistency matters." Frank gave a small, polite smile. "Consistency, I've found, is best demonstrated in how we treat people, especially when we think no one's watching." That landed like a piano in a quiet room. The silence hung. Emily, who had been standing at the galley edge, gave the faintest nod toward Frank. Even she was done pretending. Kelsey bit her lip and stepped back, but the damage was done. Passengers now leaned into the moment. The woman in 3C whispered to her husband. The man in 1D typed furiously on his phone. The teen near the window hadn't stopped recording since meal service. A text message from someone in 3B lit up. "This flight is wild. Some old guy's getting bullied by the head flight attendant and staying zen AF, cabin turning on her." The thing was, Frank wasn't trying to make a scene. He never did. He didn't like spectacle, didn't care for drama. That was for people who had something to prove. He'd spent his life in rooms where billions shifted hands over eye contact and silence. That was the world he lived in. This was theater. But even he had to admit, the curtain was lifting. Meanwhile, back in the galley, Kelsey was on edge. "She just embarrassed herself," Emily said gently, keeping her voice low. "You might want to let it go." "He's playing everyone," Kelsey hissed. "Don't you see? He's baiting the cabin." Emily blinked. "He hasn't even stood up. He's manipulating perception. It's calculated." "No," Emily said firmly. "What you're doing is calculated." Kelsey paced for a moment, tapping her nails on the countertop. Then she made a decision. A bad one. 5 minutes later, she returned to 1A, holding a thin form printed on Airline letterhead. "I'm sorry, Mr. Linwood," she said, her voice all faux professional again. "But as part of our security protocol, I'll need to verify your identification against your boarding credentials." Frank raised an eyebrow. "You need to verify my ID mid-flight?" Kelsey nodded. "We've had cases of mistaken boarding, and I just want to make sure everything aligns." This time, the reaction was instant. "What the hell?" the guy in 2A said aloud. "You're checking IDs in first class now?" Someone else scoffed. "That's harassment," a woman near the aisle muttered. "Straight up harassment." Even the pilot's voice crackled in. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated as we begin our initial descent into Toronto. Cabin crew, prepare for arrival." Frank slowly reached into his breast pocket, pulled out his worn leather wallet, and handed over his ID. Kelsey stared at it longer than necessary. Long enough for the cabin to know she wasn't checking for anything real, just trying to find something wrong. She handed it back without a word. "Thank you," Frank said softly. "Would you like to fingerprint me next?" The sarcasm wasn't biting. It was weary, and it landed harder than yelling ever could. By the time Kelsey returned to the galley, she looked pale. Passengers were whispering openly now. Phones were out, videos saved. A digital tide was rising, and she couldn't stop it. Worse, her crew tablet chimed. "Security alert. Internal flag update. Linwood, Franklin G. /VIP tier override. Do not challenge. She stared at it, and the floor beneath her pride began to give way. Back in 1A, Frank sat still, fingers lightly tapping the leather folio on his lap. He had said what needed to be said, but the silence that followed? That was the real statement. 2 rows back, the young man in 2B looked up from his phone and leaned to his companion. Who do you think he really is? The companion shrugged. But just behind them, the passenger in 2D, the one who had stayed silent all flight, spoke up without looking away from his tablet. Linwood isn't just someone. He's the guy who can cancel the runway you're flying from. The descent announcement echoed softly through the cabin, but no one was paying attention. Eyes weren't on seatbacks. They were on seat 1A, and for once, Kelsey wasn't the center of the room. She stood near the galley, motionless, face stiff as marble. In her hand, the crew tablet continued to glow, still displaying the words she had tried to ignore. VIP tier override. Do not challenge. But the override came too late. The damage was done. And the man in 1A, quiet, elderly, and until now, anonymous, wasn't going to raise his voice, demand compensation, or threaten lawsuits. No. Frank Linwood operated on a different level, one that didn't need volume to create consequences. He waited until the cabin dimmed slightly, the signal for landing preparations beginning. He closed his notebook with care, slipped the pen into the crease, and reached into the inner pocket of his cardigan. Not for a phone. For a flip phone. The kind most people hadn't seen since 2006. The kind with no apps, no games, no distractions. Just numbers that mattered. He flipped it open with one practiced hand and pressed a single button. No one around him noticed at first, but the moment he spoke, it was clear. This wasn't a call to a friend. It was business. Activate the Linwood protocol, he said quietly. The cabin hum covered most of his voice, but the passenger in 2B heard enough to lean forward. Yes, Frank continued, his tone calm and clipped, like he was reading a grocery list. Effective immediately. Begin withdrawal of Line C from Global Air. Inform Sky North we're green for the full reallocation, the full 550. There was a pause. Then, no delay. Let them feel it hit the books before market open. And place the temporary freeze on their executive comp pool. We'll let them know why later. He closed the phone with a soft click, returned it to his pocket, and resumed watching the clouds. Kelsey didn't hear the words, but she saw the phone, and that was enough. Who still used a flip phone unless they had nothing to prove and everything to control? She turned to Emily, who had just finished securing the galley. Did you see that? Kelsey whispered. Emily didn't answer. She was watching 1A too. You think he's really someone? Emily finally looked over. I think he's the kind of man who doesn't need to convince anyone of who he is. 20 rows back in economy, a woman with a Bluetooth headset was watching a news update on mute. Suddenly, her screen lit up. Market alert. Sky North Airlines jumps 4.2% pre-market after new $550 million liquidity infusion confirmed. Global Air shares drop 5.8% after unidentified investor reportedly initiates withdrawal. She blinked, her brow furrowed. Wasn't this Global Air? Frank didn't move. He didn't smirk. He didn't lean back in satisfaction. He simply folded his napkin again and set it down on the tray. For the first time in hours, he was done playing the part of the quiet passenger. Not because he needed revenge, but because he had seen enough. Captain Reynolds received the ping just as he switched frequencies with Toronto ATC. His co-pilot glanced at the tablet between them. What's that? Reynolds frowned. Level 2 compliance flag. Passenger override issued by board-level finance authority. He blinked. Linwood. His co-pilot turned his head. Frank Linwood? Reynolds exhaled. Better land this one smooth. As the landing gear dropped and the wheels found runway, the cabin buzzed again. Not from turbulence, but from text notifications. The man in 2A showed his phone to the woman across from him. Told you. Linwood Fund just pulled $550 million out of Global Air. It's happening right now. The teenager in 2B uploaded a short video with the caption, "Old guy in 1A just ended an airline with a flip phone. #respect the quiet ones." Kelsey barely held it together through landing. She did her announcements mechanically, face frozen, but every line in her body screamed, "I messed up!" Because now, even without knowing the full scope, she could feel it. The shift. Not just in the air, but in the room. She wasn't being watched like an authority anymore. She was being watched like a warning. Frank stood up slowly as the cabin lights brightened. He straightened his cardigan, tucked the folio under his arm, and offered Emily a small nod as he passed. "Thank you for your kindness," he said gently. She blinked. "Thank you for your patience." Kelsey didn't speak. Frank didn't look at her. He didn't need to. He'd already said everything he needed to say, with a phone call, a name, and a silence louder than shouting. Have you ever witnessed someone get judged by how they looked, only to surprise everyone later? Tell us what you would have done if you were sitting in that cabin, because sometimes it's the quietest person on board who lands the biggest impact. By the time the wheels kissed the tarmac in Toronto, the atmosphere in first class was nothing like it had been 3 hours earlier. Gone was the cocktail of quiet confidence, designer shoes, and polished service. In its place, a silent reckoning. The man in 1A no longer looked out of place. Now, it was everyone else who looked uncomfortable. The moment the seatbelt sign pinged off, voices picked up. Not casual, not forced, but deliberate, measured. They say he controls 4 airlines' credit systems. He didn't raise his voice once. Not once. Did you see the phone call? Flip phone. That wasn't a regular call. Sky North stock jumped before we even landed. My husband's in corporate finance. He said Global Air just lost $550 million in under 30 minutes. It was no longer a whisper game. It was testimony. And the flight attendant who had been so confident, so in control, was now holding herself like someone waiting for impact. Kelsey tried to keep busy. She cleared trays that didn't need clearing. She straightened blankets that weren't wrinkled. She smiled at passengers who didn't smile back. She walked past seat 1A without a word, without eye contact. And when Emily whispered, "You okay?" she replied without turning her head, "I need a minute." But what she really meant was, "I need this to not be happening." Frank Linwood remained as he'd been all flight, composed, silent, watching. But this time, the air around him had changed. Not because he said anything, because he no longer had to. At the gate, 2 men in dark suits waited behind the glass jetway doors, one from Global Air Corporate, the other from Linwood Capital. Neither looked amused. Kelsey saw them through the cockpit window. Her knees weakened. Captain Reynolds approached her mid-aisle. His voice was low, neutral. "Miss Moran, you'll need to speak with the team at the gate before deplaning." She nodded slowly, heart thudding. Emily looked at her, eyes wide. "What's going on?" "I don't know," Kelsey whispered, though she knew exactly what was going on. The shift had come, not from a manager, not from a bad review, from the man she tried to make small. The passengers began deplaning row by row. As they passed Frank, many gave a nod. Some paused, a quiet "sir" or "thank you" under their breath. One passenger, early 40s, suit jacket folded neatly, stopped and offered a quiet word. "You handled this flight with more grace than most men I've worked under." Frank gave a polite nod. No arrogance in it. Just the kind of acknowledgement a man gives when he's long learned to separate praise from power. The teenager, who had recorded nearly the entire flight, smiled shyly as he passed. "Your story's already viral, sir," he said. "People are calling it the first-class lesson." Frank raised one eyebrow. "Let's hope they actually learned something." Emily stayed behind after passengers disembarked, helping reset the cabin. Kelsey stood near the front, palms sweating. She could hear the murmurs from the gate staff. She could feel the silence on the radio channel. She could sense the ripple moving through the industry, and it all began because she assumed an old man in a cardigan didn't belong. Just before Frank stepped through the aircraft door, he paused. Kelsey glanced at him, expecting what? A final scolding? A lecture? A smug remark? Instead, he turned slightly, eyes calm. "I hope next time," he said gently, "you remember that some people prefer to carry their credibility quietly." Then he stepped out. No anger, no drama, just truth. Outside, he was met with a private vehicle waiting. No limo, no security detail. Just a quiet black sedan with a driver who nodded respectfully. Frank got in without another word. Inside the terminal, Kelsey was asked to sit in the airline office adjacent to the jetway. She recognized one of the men waiting, John Myers, Senior Operations Director at Global Air. The other she didn't. He introduced himself softly. "Benjamin Gray, Linwood Holdings." Kelsey's throat tightened. John cleared his throat. "We've received several internal reports and external coverage. There's a video of the in-flight interaction that's already trending." "Mr. Linwood made no formal complaint," Benjamin said, "but he did initiate a credit review for the airline based on service standards misaligned with corporate values." Kelsey sat straighter. I didn't know who he was." "That's the point," Benjamin replied. "And also the problem." Back at Linwood's Toronto office, his team was already preparing a press release. Today, Linwood Holdings has initiated a reallocation of aviation financing, reinforcing its commitment to service equity and industry accountability. It didn't name names. It didn't need to. Everyone in the airline world would read between the lines. Meanwhile, in the crew room, Emily sat alone. She opened her phone and rewatched the video from the teenager in 2B. She saw Kelsey raising her voice, saw Frank sit in stillness, heard the click of the flip phone, saw the ripple begin. And then she looked around the empty room and whispered aloud, "That's what leadership actually looks like." Passengers across North America would see the same clip by evening. News anchors would replay it with headlines like, "Old man in first class silently dismantles airline after public mistreatment." Who is Frank Linwood? The quiet billionaire who just taught Global Air a $550 lesson. Kindness wears cardigans too. Kelsey's fate wouldn't be decided in one day, but the decision had already started. Behind closed doors, at the boardroom level, in conversations where image didn't matter, only integrity. At 7:42 a.m. Eastern, Global Air's stock price dropped 3.2 in the first 4 minutes of trading. By 8:15, it was down 6.4%. And by noon, the headlines had taken over. Global Air hit by sudden withdrawal of $550 million credit facility. Industry reeling as Linwood Holdings shifts investment to Sky North. Anonymous passenger in first class causes quiet storm. Who is Frank Linwood? The story wasn't just financial anymore. It was personal. Within 24 hours, a 60-second clip from Flight GA264 had amassed 12 million views across TikTok, X, and YouTube Shorts. The caption was simple. She thought he didn't belong in first class. Turns out, he owns the runway. In the video, Kelsey was shown telling Frank to present ID. Her voice, cold. Her face, tight. Then, the flip phone. The call, the pause, the silence. He made one phone call. Now the airline is bleeding money. In the comments, "This is why you treat everyone with respect." That flight attendant just learned a $550 million lesson. I want to be that old man when I grow up. The internet wasn't just watching, it was choosing sides. And the side it picked was wearing a cardigan. At Global Air headquarters in Atlanta, the senior board convened an emergency meeting. Behind closed doors, voices were raised. Why wasn't I notified when Linwood boarded? Who approved the cabin staff on that flight? We've lost 3 institutional investors in 48 hours. Do you understand the optics? He didn't say a word, and we look like the villains. The CEO, Mitchell Rollins, tried to calm the room. "We're coordinating a statement." Someone from legal shot back. "Too late. This isn't a PR issue. It's a governance issue now." In the break room at Pearson Airport, Kelsey sat alone. Her badge had been scanned as usual. No one said anything harsh, no one yelled, but everyone had stopped making eye contact. Emily walked in and gave a polite nod. Kelsey tried to speak. "Hey, Emily paused. She looked like she wanted to say something kind, but instead, she just gave a small sigh and walked to the far counter. Kelsey stared down at her hands. Her red polish was chipped. Her fingers trembled slightly. She pulled out her phone, opened the viral video, watched it again. This time, not as herself, but as a stranger. Watched her own face twist with authority. Watched her try to mask insecurity with professionalism. Watched herself press a man for ID who had said nothing but thank you. And then, that call. Simple, unbothered. 5 sentences. And her world started falling apart. At Sky North's office in Chicago, champagne corks were already being popped. "We're up 9.2% since yesterday," someone from strategy laughed. "Linwood just handed us a quarter's worth of growth in one morning." Their CEO, a cautious man named Darian Rowe, didn't smile. He held the press release in his hand from Linwood Holdings and nodded. "Get the exec team ready what to do," he said. "We're about to become the new benchmark for what respect in aviation looks like." Meanwhile, Frank Linwood, he was in no press room. He wasn't doing interviews. He wasn't even online. He was sitting on a park bench in Toronto's Rosedale Park, coat buttoned, hands folded, watching a golden retriever chase squirrels in the leaves. No driver, no entourage. Just the quiet presence of a man who had done what he came to do and had no interest in applause. Back at Global Air, the HR team met quietly in a side room. They pulled up Kelsey's file. Evaluations, passenger reviews, incident logs. A note came in from the legal department. "We cannot terminate based on video alone, but recommend immediate removal from international rotation pending formal review." One line added below it in red. "Place on internal watch list, Category B, reputational risk." It wasn't a firing, but it was a beginning. That evening, Emily sat in her apartment watching a replay of the cabin footage. Again. This time, she noticed something she hadn't before. Right before Frank made the call, he looked out the window, not for view, but for calm. Like he needed just 10 seconds of stillness before changing the course of a billion-dollar machine. Emily whispered aloud, almost to herself. "He didn't punish us. He just reminded us who really has class." 2 days after Frank Linwood's quiet descent onto a Toronto runway, the industry was no longer asking, "Who is he?" They were asking, "What does he want?" And the answer was about to change the way airlines operated. The first signal came quietly, just an internal memo, circulated among 5 major airlines and a dozen credit officers. Effective immediately, Linwood Holdings is reviewing all outstanding aviation financing portfolios. Renewal terms to include equity and new training oversight and staff conduct metrics. Non-compliance will result in divestment within 21 business days. No public statement, no press conference, just a notice. Simple, sharp, in the same tone Frank had used on that flip phone. Inside Global Air's boardroom, the impact was immediate. CEO Mitchell Rollins slammed the memo onto the conference table. "This is a takeover by another name," he barked. "No," said the CFO, adjusting his glasses. "This is called consequences." He read aloud from the fine print. "All partners under the Linwood Aviation Network must implement a uniform policy for frontline crew evaluation, based on Dignity First metrics, effective this quarter." "What does that even mean?" someone scoffed. The head of HR replied quietly, "It means our days of letting image outweigh integrity are over." No one said a word after that. At Sky North's headquarters, things moved faster. Within hours of receiving the same memo, CEO Darian Rowe had called a full executive briefing. "I want proposals on a behavior-based scoring system for in-flight crew by end of day," he said. "Passenger visible, Real-time feedback. Simple and ungameable. He looked around the room. And I want the phrase first class to mean something again. Not a price tag. A mindset. His team nodded. Sky North was about to go from underdog to gold standard. Meanwhile, Frank Linwood never once mentioned the name Kelsey Moran. He didn't have to. She was watching it unfold from her living room couch, news playing softly, coffee untouched on the table beside her. In an unprecedented move, Linwood Holdings has triggered an industry-wide shift in how airlines monitor staff behavior. While the move was catalyzed by a now viral interaction on board Global Air Flight GA264, no individuals have been named publicly. The footage played again, her face on screen, her voice sharp, accusatory, cold, and Frank still, calm, the flip phone in hand. Then, everything else. She shut the TV off. Silence filled the room, but not peace. The screen had gone dark, but her own reflection stared back. Not a monster, not a victim. Just a woman who thought she knew who mattered and forgot to ask why. 3 days later, the Linwood Standard was officially introduced. It wasn't flashy. It didn't promise bonuses or penalties. It simply outlined a crew evaluation system accessible to passengers in real time. Metrics based on respect, clarity, dignity, and inclusion. A weighted score tied to crew rotation and promotion eligibility, and a non-negotiable clause. No cabin crew member may make judgment based on a passenger's appearance, attire, perceived status, or silence. Within 1 week, 3 major airlines adopted the Standard. 2 more announced pending negotiations. Over 400 crew members voluntarily signed the new code of conduct. The industry press dubbed it the Quiet Revolution. Frank didn't attend the press briefings. He didn't sit for interviews. He didn't post a word. He was back in Washington State, walking the path behind his lakefront cabin, hands in his coat pockets, birdsong in his ears. He never needed to raise his voice. He just needed people to hear the silence. Back in Toronto, Emily was selected to represent junior crew at a Sky North training summit, one of the first to adopt the Linwood Standard. She stood nervously before a room of supervisors, pilots, flight staff, and HR reps. And then she spoke. "I was there," she said, "on the flight where this all began." She told them about the man in 1A, not just what he did, but how he made people feel. He didn't demand anything. He didn't shame anyone. But somehow, he changed everything. She paused. Because class isn't what you wear. It's what you offer someone who has nothing to prove. In the weeks that followed, a quiet ripple became a reform wave. Several major carriers announced new diversity awareness modules, mandatory for all cabin crew. One airline proposed removing cabin class labels from boarding zones altogether, just window, middle, aisle, dignity. Passenger satisfaction began to rise, not because food got better, but because passengers felt seen, not sorted. Kelsey, still under review, was quietly moved to non-customer-facing duties, filing logs, answering compliance emails, shuffling paper. No more aisle walks, no more curt greetings, no more moments to assert authority in a cabin where she'd once ruled with an iron smile. But somehow, the silence around her now felt earned. Frank received one handwritten letter that week from Emily. She didn't ask for anything. She simply wrote, "Thank you for teaching us that the loudest authority isn't always the one speaking. Some of us were listening. I promise you that." He placed it between the pages of his notebook, folded gently. Like truth, the letter came in a plain white envelope, slid under her door without a knock. Kelsey stared at it for 5 full minutes before opening it. Inside, the header was short. Global Air Internal Notice. Roll Status Update. Her eyes went straight to the bolded line in the center. Effective immediately, your active crew status has been placed on indefinite hold pending full behavioral audit and compliance review. The paper trembled slightly in her hand. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't probation. This was the slow, deliberate clearing of a seat, and it was hers. Across the city, in a hotel ballroom overlooking downtown Toronto, the North American Aviation Standards Summit was preparing for its keynote address. Rows of pressed suits and navy blazers, name tags clipped with perfect alignment, coffee stations humming, PR reps pacing. In the center row, Emily adjusted her collar. Her badge read, Emily Sloan, Cabin Crew Delegate, Global Air. She almost hadn't come. She didn't feel ready. But when corporate called to ask if she'd be willing to represent frontline staff at the summit, instead of Kelsey, who had scheduling conflicts, she had said yes. And now here she was, not as a backup, but as a voice. Back in her apartment, Kelsey scrolled through the live stream on her phone. She shouldn't have watched. It only made the ache sharper. Emily was up there now, being introduced by a Sky North executive. One of the few attendants who directly witnessed the events of Flight GA264. Her perspective, we believe, represents the kind of professional humility our industry needs. Kelsey muted the audio. Her heart pounded. She wasn't angry. Not anymore. She was empty. On stage, Emily spoke into the mic with hands just barely shaking. "I remember when Mr. Linwood first boarded," she began. "He looked like anyone's grandfather. Quiet, soft-spoken, simple cardigan, a leather notebook." She paused. "And I remember how quickly people decided he didn't belong." There was silence in the room. I didn't stop it. I wish I had. But I saw something that day that changed me, and I think it's why we're all here now. She looked out at the rows of airline executives, trainers, and finance directors. We're taught to smile, to serve, to maintain an image. But we weren't taught how to see people. Or worse, we were taught who to ignore. In the back of the ballroom, a tall man in a dark gray coat entered quietly. He didn't take the front row. He didn't stand near press or officials. He simply sat in the last chair of the last row and listened. Frank Linwood didn't need the spotlight. He'd never needed it. But he came today, for one reason only, to make sure they listened. Emily's voice grew firmer. "We can't undo the past, but we can rewrite what comes next. And if we're going to call something first class, it better start with how we treat the people who sit there." Applause followed. Not thunderous, not theatrical, but honest. Frank let it happen without a smile. Just a nod. The kind of nod that said, "She got it." Meanwhile, Kelsey stood frozen in her kitchen, staring at the sink, water running, untouched. For the first time, she asked herself, what was I protecting that day on the plane? Was it service standards, or was it just my own sense of power? She didn't have an answer, only memories. Her voice, asking Frank for ID in front of everyone. Her posture, stiff with control. Her assumption that kindness came with a dress code. At the summit, the moderator cleared his throat. "And now," he said, "we'd like to invite the man whose quiet actions set all of this in motion. He asked not to speak, but he's agreed to sit with us for a few moments and answer one question." The ballroom turned. Frank walked slowly toward the stage. No suit, no tie, just the same cardigan, same calm, same authority without volume. He sat in the single chair provided. A mic was placed before him. "Mr. Linwood," the moderator asked, "why didn't you say anything that day?" Frank looked up, thoughtful. "I did," he said simply, "just not the way they expected." The room waited. He continued, "People think silence means surrender. It doesn't. It means I'm letting you reveal yourself." He paused. What happened on that flight wasn't new. It happens in smaller ways every day, in cafes, in schools, in lobbies, in checkout lines. But that day, there were cameras, and context, and consequence. He looked out at the room, not accusing, not angry, just clear. So if we're here today thinking this was about punishing someone, we're wasting time. The point isn't who was wrong, it's that we were blind to how common it is. He glanced briefly toward Emily, then back to the crowd. Change doesn't come from calling people out. It comes from calling them in and making sure they know next time can be different. Then he stood and walked off stage. No applause, just a standing silence. The most respectful kind. Back in her apartment, Kelsey watched it all. No tears, just one whispered sentence. Next time, I'll know better. That night, Global Air's CEO released a memo to staff. We thank Mr. Linwood for showing the power of quiet leadership. Effective next month, all crew evaluations will include behavior-based metrics tied to the Linwood standard. We are committed to restoring dignity as the first measure of excellence. Frank returned to his cabin in Washington 2 days later. He never posted about the summit. He never answered media calls. But he did one thing. He opened a new page in his notebook and wrote 6 words across the top. Respect should never need a reminder. Have you ever realized too late that you misjudged someone? Or were you the one misjudged, yet chose to lead with dignity anyway? Share your moment. You never know who's learning from your silence. 3 weeks after the summit, a letter arrived at Frank Linwood's lakeside home. It came by courier, sealed in a navy blue envelope, bearing the embossed logo of the North American Aviation Standards Council, the same body that, just 2 months earlier, had declined his recommendation to review cabin crew evaluation metrics. Inside, it read, Dear Mr. Linwood, in recognition of the impact your leadership has had across our industry, we would like to formally invite you to serve as chair of the newly formed Ethical Standards Advisory Board. Your insight is invaluable, and we believe your continued presence will ensure the momentum toward reform not only lasts, but leads. Respectfully, Margaret Kane, Chairwoman, North American Aviation Standards Council. Frank read it twice, then folded it slowly, placed it on the side table, and poured himself a cup of tea. He didn't smile, but something in his chest softened. The next morning, his response arrived via fax, old-fashioned, handwritten. Dear Ms. Kane, thank you for your gracious invitation. I accept, under one condition. I will not hold a chair. I will not speak at banquets. I will not wear a badge. But I will advise quietly, and only if your team agrees to build a system that outlives the spotlight. Dignity is not a press release. It is a habit. F. Linwood. That same week, a pilot training center in Chicago launched its first Linwood Method workshop, a one-day course required for all in-flight personnel scheduled for senior routes. On the welcome screen, a single phrase. Class begins where judgment ends. Among the 32 attendees that morning, Kelsey Moran. No one had forced her. Her file was still under review, and she could have easily sat it out until a quiet dismissal. But she came, hair tied back, no lipstick, no badge, just a notebook, a pen, and, for the first time in years, no pretense. The instructor, a former flight captain named Rhonda, began the session with no icebreaker. Instead, she wrote on the board, "What's the difference between service and control?" Silence. Kelsey stared at the words. 15 years ago, she would have said, "Nothing. They're the same thing." Now, she just listened. Across the continent, Emily Sloan had been invited to record a training module with Sky North, responding to bias without losing authority. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't rehearsed. They simply asked her, "What did you learn from Flight GA264?" She answered honestly, "I learned that the most powerful thing you can do when someone's being misjudged is to stand next to them. Not in front, not behind, just next to them." The module went viral inside industry Slack channels. A few crew leads forwarded it to their teams with a note. "This is what I've been trying to say for years." Frank never commented publicly on the reforms, but changes kept happening. At Delta West, a new in-flight policy quietly replaced first class with front cabin. At Aero Nova, A CEO memo banned crew from referring to passengers by clothing or seat status in official logs. And at Global Air, where it all began, the entire HR team was reorganized around a new value proposition. We serve people, not profiles. Kelsey completed the Linwood Method workshop in silence. At the end, the instructor asked each participant to write a personal statement, something they'd keep. Kelsey wrote, "I used to think service meant protecting the brand. Now I think it means protecting a human moment before it breaks." She didn't sign it. She didn't need to. 1 month later, she received a call from Emily. "I heard you finished the workshop," Emily said. "Yeah," Kelsey replied. "It shook me up." There was a pause. "I'm glad," Emily said. "I'm really glad." Another pause, this one longer. Kelsey cleared her throat. "Do you think they'll ever let me fly again?" Emily didn't answer right away. Then, "If they don't, maybe that's not the worst thing. Maybe this wasn't about flying. Maybe it was about learning how to land." Kelsey blinked hard. "Thank you." Emily just smiled into the phone. At a cabin crew conference in Austin, one panel drew a larger than usual crowd. Not because of the speakers, because of the title, Invisible Power, the Ethics of Quiet Authority. Inspired by the Linwood Standard 1 attendant whispered to another, "Can you believe a single passenger started all this?" Her colleague shook her head. No, a single reaction did. His. In Washington, Frank walked the lakeside trail alone, wind brushing his face. He passed 2 teenagers on bikes. One glanced back, then whispered, "Is that?" The other shrugged. "I think so, but he won't say." They rode on. Frank kept walking. Behind him, a sign rustled on the bulletin board near the trailhead. Someone had pinned a printout of the Linwood Standard there, right under the flyer for a lost cat. No signature, just the words, "Silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it means you're letting them show who they really are." Kelsey Moran didn't expect to step onto another plane so soon. Her role hadn't been reinstated, not officially. She wasn't on the schedule. She wasn't cleared for regular service, but a program coordinator at SkyNorth had called unexpectedly. "We're launching a shadow training flight under the Linwood Method next week," she'd said. "Observers only. We're inviting a few former cases." Kelsey knew what that meant. They wanted to see if the lesson stuck. She didn't hesitate. "I'll be there." The flight was short, Chicago to Denver. 2 hours. A small crew. Just enough time for the air to reveal who people really were. Kelsey wore no uniform. Just a navy blouse, gray slacks, and a small notebook in her purse. She took seat 14C, middle aisle, back half. No one paid her much attention, and that was just fine. She wasn't there to be seen. She was there to see. Boarding was smooth, until row 16. That's when she noticed the girl. Young, maybe 19, black, hoodie, carry-on bag frayed at the edges. She handed over her ticket to the crew member at the door, a man maybe 5 years into the job. His name tag read Cole. He squinted at her pass. "This seat is for Zone 1 priority only," he said, voice flat. She nodded politely. "I'm Group 3, but I got upgraded." He frowned. "Who upgraded you?" The girl hesitated. "I don't know. My aunt used her miles. She said it was confirmed." Cole looked her up and down. "You're sure this isn't a mistake?" The girl nodded again, but the tone shifted. People behind her began shifting their weight. The moment had come, the one Kelsey knew by heart. That quiet, loaded pause where someone's dignity starts slipping through the cracks of a uniform smile. Kelsey leaned forward. Just a little, just enough to see. Cole sighed and handed the ticket back. "Go ahead," he muttered. But the damage was done. The girl walked past quickly, eyes low. Her hands clutched her bag like armor. She passed Kelsey, and their eyes met for just a second. That look, the one Frank Linwood had given her months ago. Not angry, not afraid, just disappointed. Meal service came and went. Conversation in the cabin stayed light, but Kelsey's mind was heavy. The moment at the gate shouldn't have bothered her. It was mild, subtle. No one shouted, no one was kicked off. But that's what made it dangerous. It was quiet discrimination, the kind that slips between policies, the kind she had once mastered. Now, she hated how familiar it felt. When the flight landed in Denver, the debrief was set to happen inside a lounge near Gate 9. Observers would gather, notes would be shared. No names, no consequences, just feedback. Kelsey sat down, arms folded, the girl from row 16 still fresh in her mind. The training lead, a woman named Jada, opened the session. "So," she asked the group, "any moments stand out?" Silence. One man mentioned how efficient the beverage cart was. Another praised the calm during turbulence. Then Kelsey raised her hand. All eyes turned. "Yes, Kelsey." She exhaled, then spoke. At the gate, a young black woman was challenged for her seat. The tone was restrained, but biased. Jada's brow lifted. "You're sure it wasn't procedural?" She had a confirmed upgrade. The crew member questioned her, asked if she was mistaken. No one else in the group was asked that. A few heads nodded slowly. Someone across the table added, "I saw it too. I didn't say anything." Kelsey looked down, then back up. "I used to be that crew member," she said quietly, always assuming politeness meant permission to doubt someone's place. Jada stayed quiet, let the room breathe. Then, what should have happened instead? Kelsey didn't miss a beat. He should have greeted her like anyone else. Trusted the ticket, trusted her, let her belong without needing proof. Back in the terminal, the girl from row 16 waited at the luggage carousel. Kelsey approached slowly. "Hey," she said. The girl turned, cautious. Kelsey smiled softly. "You handled that with more grace than most people twice your age." The girl shrugged. "It happens." "I know," Kelsey said, "but it shouldn't." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small folded card, an official feedback form linked to the Linwood Evaluation Network. "You can log what happened if you want, anonymous, real-time record." The girl looked surprised, then took it. "Thanks," she said, voice quiet. Kelsey nodded. "Thank you," she replied, "for reminding me." That night, Kelsey wrote her first full report to the Linwood Advisory Office, not because she had to, but because she wanted her missteps to mean something more than regret. Her final sentence read, "I used to think silence made me strong. Now I know it only matters when you use it to listen first, and then speak for the ones who weren't." Somewhere in Washington, Frank read the report. He smiled, just slightly, and turned the page. It was early spring in Washington state. The air still carried a bite, but buds were blooming along the lake trail behind the small cabin nestled between pine and sky. Frank Linwood sat on the wooden bench overlooking the water, notebook in hand, pen uncapped but unmoving. He hadn't written much lately, not because he had nothing to say, but because, for the first time in a long while, the system was speaking for itself. A car pulled into the gravel path, quiet tires, no rush. From the passenger side stepped a woman in a slate gray coat, her hands clasped in front of her, shoulders drawn, but face steady. It had taken her 6 weeks to send the letter, 3 more to work up the nerve to ask for a conversation, and now here she was, Kelsey Moran, the woman who once stood like a sentry at the first-class curtain, now just a guest. Frank turned at the sound of footsteps. No surprise in his eyes. He simply nodded toward the bench beside him. She walked slowly, then sat. Silence, but not awkward. She looked out over the lake, not at him. He waited. Then, softly, she spoke. "I didn't come for forgiveness." "I know," he replied. She let that settle. "I used to think I had power," she said, "because I controlled the cabin, the boarding order, the tone. Frank didn't interrupt. But I didn't have control, she continued. Just fear. Fear of looking weak. Fear of being replaced. Fear of passengers who didn't fit. Her voice trembled slightly. I was guarding the wrong door. Frank's eyes softened. The one to your own humility? She nodded. And I almost lost everything before I found it. He leaned back, eyes on the water. You didn't lose everything, he said. You still had ears, and you started using them. She smiled, faint and broken. I thought silence was submission, but now I know it can be space, for reflection, for reset. Frank nodded. Silence lets truth echo. They sat there a moment longer. No drama, no violin swell. Just a woman who had stopped protecting her pride, and a man who had never needed to prove his. Back in Seattle, the Linwood Standard had quietly become the industry norm. No one talked about it like a revolution anymore, because now it just looked like common sense. Cabin crew received real-time feedback. Passengers saw a visible respect rating tag alongside Wi-Fi login prompts. Reports of gate-side profiling had dropped 41% across 3 major airlines, and new hires were trained first not in wine lists, but in witnessing without judgment. Emily stood in a training room that morning, leading a workshop for Sky North's newest recruits. On the screen behind her was a still image. An empty seat, 1A. Just a cardigan draped neatly over the armrest. She turned to the group. Anyone know whose seat this was? A few hands shot up. She smiled. Doesn't matter. What matters is how he was treated when no one knew. That tells you everything about the culture we're building now. That evening, Emily received a short message. It was from Frank. They're lucky to have your voice, but more than that, they're lucky you choose to use it. In Toronto, Kelsey received her final clearance notice. She wouldn't be returning to full-time flight service, but she had been offered something else. Training lead, cabin ethics and culture program, Global Air HQ. Her new title wasn't glamorous. No uniforms, no in-flight upgrades, no elite lounges. But it came with a simple description. Teach others not to repeat what you once did. She clicked accept, then closed her laptop and let out the first full breath in weeks. 1 year after the incident, the summit returned. Same city, same venue. But this time, the keynote wasn't about consequences. It was about legacy. Frank sat in the third row. Emily stood at the podium. And Kelsey, for the first time, stood beside her, not in shame, but in solidarity. They didn't share a story of scandal. They shared a story of change, of a mistake caught on video, of a silence that wasn't weakness, of a call that wasn't shouted, but heard around the world. Frank left before the applause. He didn't like being clapped for, but as he exited, a young man in a Sky North blazer approached quietly. Mr. Linwood? Frank turned. The man handed him a boarding pass. First class, seat 1A. Anytime you're ready to fly again, the man said. This time, everyone will know who's in the seat, and why that doesn't matter. Frank took the ticket, smiled, didn't say yes, didn't say no, just nodded, and walked into the late afternoon light. What if one moment of silence could become the start of something bigger? Have you ever seen someone quietly right a wrong? Or better yet, have you ever done it yourself? Drop your thoughts below, because class isn't where you sit, it's what you choose to stand for.